progressive movement. Usually, when we talk about the progressive movement, it was a period of time from around 1890s. Some people go all the way to the 1920s. Usually, when I teach the class and go into more detail with the lectures, I usually go until the start of from the early 1890s to the start of the of World War One. Like I said, the progressive movement was very similar to the populist movement. Some people, some historians even argue that it was really the same movement. But for things to work, or for there to be change in a movement or a revolution or whatever, you have to have a certain coalition. The populists were really just the poor. But in order for things to really change, you need the poor plus the middle class plus some people that are in power. For example, Theodore Roosevelt, he became president, and but he was considered a populist. A populist president, or usually is known as a progressive president. Now, we see the progressive movement on the local level, the state level, and the federal level, and we see it among African Americans. We see it among women. And we talked a little bit about Booker T. Washington when we discussed the populist movement, and he was considered both a populist and later, people considered him a progressive. And I said that Booker T. Washington started the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, which focused on technical education for African Americans. But W.E.B. Du Bois, and we say he wanted it pronounced Dubois. We would say Dubois because we're from South Louisiana. That's the actual pronunciation, but he liked the pronunciation with the S. He was the first African American to graduate from Harvard, and he pushed for what at that time was considered more radical reform, and stated that everyone should be allowed, if they wanted a university education, to get one. He said that there could be no economic equality without political rights. Booker T. Washington argued that, let's forget about the political stuff right now. Let's focus on economic empowerment in our communities. But W.B. Du Bois was saying, no, that's really impossible. Women were also a very big part of the progressive movement. And there were female unions, such as the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, and they struggled for better pay and working conditions. Women were also involved in social reform movements. Young middle-class women like Jane Addams operated settlement houses in Chicago, which provided the poor with food, education, health care, child care, and things like that, and helped the poor acquire financial and job skills. Adams' work garnered her a Nobel Peace Prize in 1931. They also, when I say they, I mean women, also started the Women's Christian Temperance Union, which led the fight for the prohibition of the sale of alcohol. It was viewed by many women that alcohol was the cause of a lot of domestic violence and things like that. And eventually that led to the prohibition movement, which was the prohibition era, all right, which was started by the 18th Amendment, which was just, think about that. That was not just a law, but an amendment to the Constitution outlawing the sale, manufacture, and consumption of alcohol. Like I said, it was a total disaster in Louisiana, South Louisiana. Socialists were also part of the progressive movement to some extent, and we need to talk a little bit about socialism. Socialism is a type of economic system in which the means of production is owned by the government that is democratically elected. So, basically, if the government represents the people, and the government owns everything, owns all businesses, then in theory, everyone owns everything together. Socialism, like that's pure socialism. has for the most part been um, seen as something that simply doesn't work. I mean, but it is a very idealistic way of viewing an economic system. Everyone is sort of you have equality of outcome. There's no poor. Everybody's working. That type of thing. Eugene V. Debs was a famous socialist at the beginning of the uh, 20th century. He was a very tall, charismatic individual, and he advocated not for revolution, but he advocated for a gradual, peaceful, and democratic shift from capitalism to socialism, beginning with the nationalization of the railroad, telegraph, and telephone companies. Uh, Debs, like I said, I mean, there's not too many socialists around these days, and probably a lot of his ideas, um, if they had, some would argue that his ideas, if they had been actually implemented, would not have worked. But he was a very idealistic guy, and really pushed, for major reform and for more equality. And he ran for president unsuccessfully in 1912. But he once said that I'd rather vote for something I want and not get it than vote for something I don't want and get it. Oftentimes today, when we vote, a lot of people vote against someone instead of really for someone, unfortunately. A big part of the progressive movement was the muckrakers. The muckrakers were journalists who talked about all the problems of the society. One of the most famous was The Jungle, written by Upton Sinclair, and it really shocked the nation. Sinclair had hoped to focus the public attention on the plight of foreign workers and how they were being exploited. But instead, instead of hitting people's heart, he said he hit their stomach. Sinclair told of the sale of meat stacked on the packing house floor, of the sale of pregnant or diseased cows, of packers with boils on their hands, of rancid butter whose odor was hidden by chemicals, of horse and goat meat disguised as beef. I mean, horse and goat meat really not so bad actually, if you think about it. I ate some horse one time in Belgium, and it was all right, but it's not like I get the envie for some horse. Sometimes, like, man, I wouldn't mind eating in some horse. But anyway, I ate some cabri before too, some goat meat. It wasn't too bad. Also, he talked about the sale of moldy meat rejected in Europe, the sale of beef covered in rat droppings and moisture from dripping ceilings, the transportation of meat in rusted old barrels, of workers washing their hands in water, which was then used to make sausage, and worst of all, of a few occasions when poisoned rats or even workers fell into the vats and were sold as part of the beef. After reading this, Roosevelt, who was the president in 1906, went and regurgitated in the White House bathroom. There was a little popular jingle at the time that said, Mary had a little lamb, and when she saw it sicken, she shipped it off to Packingtown, and now it's labeled chicken. And we're going to talk about some of these other things in the next lecture.